Hi all, we're just about to get underway. The host of the show is just making his way up, but getting stopped by talking to people. Before we get underway, we do not ever charge for live streaming. Just be aware there are scammers out there targeting our page at the moment, and we are trying to sort it out as quick as possible.
Welcome everybody, thank you for coming along tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Don Gould. Oh, excellent, I'm going to smile. They got a terrible photo of me last time. Okay, so I'm going to start by wandering through what tonight's plan is. It's going to be a little bit different from what we did the other day. So there's the first slide, I'm sure you all read it. Basically I'm going to today's about presentation of the paper by staff, questions by elected members. This may last a couple of that doesn't make any sense, does it? Opportunity to change the motion, debate, understanding the process. Oh, that's what I meant to say. We're going to start out by talking a little bit about the process tonight. And after we've talked about the process, we're going to move to the next slide, which we're going to talk about this. Really, this package, I'm going to suggest to you focus about round one. And after we get this into the public, then we'll have a look at round two. Because I haven't been satisfied with $1 million, I don't know about you lot. Then we're going to just have a bit of a talk about any concerns and questions that haven't been mentioned so far. Right. Wow. Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about tonight is how this is going to unfold, because what's coming through clearly from Facebook is a lot of you folk, especially out there in Facebook land, don't actually understand the process of what happens with a paper. The paper is put together by staff and will be presented on Thursday at the council meeting. What will unfold next is the council staff giving an explanation of the paper that they're presenting. And often they will use terms like, we will take the paper as read, because they will assume that all the elected members, having had 2 or 3 days to read it, will have read it in detail and have compiled the list of questions that they want to ask. What will happen next is questions by elected members. My expectation is that process may in fact take a couple of hours, because I would expect that what we're going to see this time is elected members climbing over this issue like you've never seen before, dotting every T, questioning everything that's in it. And they will also use this opportunity to present loaded questions, to make their point and their position felt around the table. There will be an opportunity to change the motion. So what you'll see in the paper is that council staff will make some recommendations as to what councillors should vote on. Now you will have seen already through the media and in the paper that there's a potentially $1 million on the table. That doesn't mean that staff can't actually make a motion that staff go away and find $5 million or $10 million or $100 million. That will be part of the process. So just because it only says $1 million, which divided by 3,000 homes means roughly $350 each per household, doesn't necessarily mean that's what the members will actually decide on. Following that, there will be a debate session. So basically the members in conjunction with the chair, which will be Andrew Turner for tomorrow's meeting, not the mayor. They will then debate the motion. Normally this is an opportunity for members just to grandstand their position on the points. They only get 3 minutes to speak each and they don't all need to speak. So that part of the meeting may be completely irrelevant to anything. At that point they will vote on the motion. At this point I'd like to ask, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about how the process works? Yes, sir.
Yes, John Woodhurst. I'm just wondering, is the meeting tomorrow going to be broadcast over the internet?
Okay, so John, to answer your question, a couple of points. The Finance and Performance Committee meeting on Thursday is live streamed off the council's website. And we will post links to that into the Facebook space. Additionally, what is not live streamed is that members will probably engage with staff between now and then. I've certainly been asked to catch up with staff between now and then. But also, my expectation is staff will probably climb through this video. They're certainly climbing through our social media at present.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Excellent. This could be a nice, quick, short meeting tonight, I would love it. Right. Okay. So, heaven knows what I was thinking this afternoon when I wrote all this down. You can probably all read it. Okay, so I'll read it to you. This is not like anything you've seen before in your lifetime. This is not an earthquake where no one is to blame. Obviously, there could have been more of a contingency plan in place for what happens if these things go offline. One of the things that I think councillors understand is that with the earthquakes, everybody understood that it was no one's fault that there was an earthquake. We all just had to rally together and agree to put our city back together. This is going to be slightly different, and I think that members certainly understand that this community, and in fact the entire east, because this is stench is now moving out as far as Papanui last night. It absolutely stank at St Bede's High School last night, I'm told, where there was a public meeting held. The plant burnt down. The operator owner has dithered. We all understand that. They absolutely dithered over this stuff. Our homes and our properties are getting damaged. That's why I'm suggesting that this first tranche of support is about round one. It is about getting some money into the homes of the identified first 3,000. I appreciate there are people that are going to be 50 metres off the border of that space and they're just as affected. The idea here I suggest to the public is that this is about getting those people into medical assistance for themselves, their animals, and address their immediate problems, and then we see how that sort of pans out. We don't at this stage know how many people will even show up for help, other than the support hubs that have been identified. I am told are fairly confident that if there is an offer on the table, everyone will probably accept it. Personally, I see this as once those people have received their wage assistance, it's a little bit like going to the buffet and letting the adults go first, the kids go second, or vice versa. Everyone's going to want to have their piece to say. And I think that's going to be important that as a community, if you are not in the impacted area, then you're going to have to make your voice heard, because there are other elected, we've got a number of elected members with us tonight, but there are others around the city who represent voters on the other side of the city who do not understand still the scale of this. Even though there has been just a media bombardment, they still don't understand that scale. Your health is impacted. That is a key message that the City Council have got. If anyone thinks that Council haven't heard it, you're just kidding. The mental health concerns, Council, I believe, already understand that even the public are not really getting the gravity at this stage of that. As I said there, the next point is the scale of this has yet to dawn on a massive number of people across the city. Most people just don't understand. And that is the challenge for the first 3,000. And my view is that this is one of the things that the Strengthening Communities team are looking at, is to help that community come back to a state of wellness so they can start to communicate in a realisation that they are actually more impacted. We've got a lot of people who are just quietly putting up with it, quietly thinking to themselves, well, I live in Bromley, I guess you just sort of have to put up with this and it happens. Well, yeah, no. When it happens, we've all got to get together as a team and sort it out faster than we are at present. There are global precedences when things go bang, when councils are bad actors and when non-impacted public don't want to show concern because of other priorities. There's a stadium that's on the line here. The government has pledged $220 million to horizontal infrastructure across the city, and we decided to spend a big chunk of that on a stadium. One might argue that that money should be spent on fixing our water, fixing our sewer, fixing our roads in our communities before we build big playgrounds in the centre of the city. $1 million from existing surplus is clearly not enough, it's just a start. I find the council's claim that this is just coming out of a surplus instead of being a budget. It is annual plan time. That's where our councillors consider what the long-term plan, our 3-year plan, is supposed to be considering, and they consider if those priorities that were set 2 years ago now line up for the 3rd year before we go into another long-term planning session. This is going to make a hiccup because there is certainly going to have to be more money put on budget to address this problem. While the plant was well insured, it looks like the public liability to operate, put your phone on silent please. While the plant was well insured, it looks like the public liability to operate the plant in a space like this is not. The cost of recovery and compensation will be on the whole city's ratepayers. It may take time for that to dawn on the entire city. Whether those health costs are picked up by our doctors, which comes out of central government, one thing that's not happening is this is not coming out of insurance payments. And one of the questions, in writing that, what I was thinking about this afternoon, is one of the questions I've got for the City Council moving forward is whether we need $1 billion public liability insurance on our plants so that they don't just come back and say the trickle filters are insured for $90 million plus $10 million for interruption plus $5 million to do an insurance claim, but $1 billion to address issues across the impacted neighbours. Currently, this council is not being a good neighbour in my view, and clearly not yours either if we believe the comments in social media. Every dollar on compensation and assistance is a reprioritise from something else. New facilities, subsidies for events, and nice to haves. This is the challenge that is going to come into the annual planning and then into our long-term plan budgets as far as I'm concerned. Because this plant is clearly going to cost some money. It looks at present like it's going to take another 6 weeks or more just to get pumps in place to improve the secondary processing of the sewage before it goes out to the ponds. It seems like most people are of the view now that it's not the trickle filters that stink, it's in fact the ponds that stink. People are certainly suggesting to me that the ponds, which are supposed to be a space of life, the bird life is left, the ponds themselves appear to be dead, and that's why they stink, is the suggestion people are giving me. How we reseed that, I've had questions already this week whether it can be reseeded, just like, I can't remember an example right now, things you reseed, but whether they can kick them back into life. That's why one of my questions tabled today is whether we can flush the things. Because reseeding it, if we're going to continue to pour poisonous effluent into them, is probably not going to kickstart them either. One of the points I'm making there as well is that we're still not getting technical transparency from the council. We're certainly improving the comms, I think everyone can agree on that, but we're not getting enough technical information for a deep dive into understanding what's going on. And I also don't feel like we're getting enough support in terms of there are other people in the community with skills who would like to step up to the plate, and what we saw the last time someone had a go at that is it became a political football of one of members arguing, instead of actually getting everybody around the table and going, well, this might not be the best solution, but the idea is right, how do we progress this? I have talked to contractors who said that they were asked to engage. They did engage, they felt particularly unwelcome, so they stepped away. I've talked to other people with skills in the space who are saying, until they come and ask me, I'm not going anywhere near that. And that sort of thing is a problem to me. It means that we're not, as a community, working together as a team to solve something that is clearly a big problem. Right, I feel like I've done enough ranting. Let's throw this open and find out if people have come along with any new concerns or questions that they have that we haven't already canvassed out. Go. No one?
Yeah, well, if they don't hurry up and get these filters done, this smell won't go away. Head on. They can't purify it, so the smell here until that plant's completely up and running. So the question is, the longer they leave anything out there, the more we're going to get it. I've lived in the neighbourhood, I'm still in the house that I'm in. I live in Thomas Street, I was born in that house. I've been here for 55 years now. This smell was exactly the same as a kid. Until we got these domes on top, it actually wasn't too bad to live here. Now, this could be almost a major disaster if you really want to look at it. You know, they rain on, where's the ECAT? What are they doing?
Okay, can I throw a question back at you, but also can I throw an answer to you as well? Where ECAN is, because we have heard from them, is they don't feel like prodding the bear, to say, by taking court action, is actually going to help to spur the team on any further. However, having said that, there are elected members in the room who disagree with that position and have been very vocal in the chamber when ECAN councillors have turned up, making exactly that point. So there is definitely division. So we come back to not working as a team. Now, my question for you, sir, and the room is to consider. One of the things we could do is put together some temporary trickling filters. I put an article up online about this the other day. The technology is quite possible to do, but it would involve spending a lot of money, which when we finish completing the new plant, the money we've spent will be a complete write-off. And it could be $30 million, it could be $50 million just for a temporary solution, which would mean we know that $34 million, which is the organics processing plant number that we were presented with today, means 1.5% increase in rates. Would you have a problem with asking your community to put into their pocket for another 1.5%, or changing the priorities around the council to say, push that stadium out by another 6 months, or cut our libraries down by 20%, or something else? Would that cause you a problem?
No.
Is there anyone in the room who would say that would cause them a problem? Right, so that's pretty unanimous.
Yeah, so what was the question?
So the question again, I'll revisit the question. The question is, if we were to build some temporary trickling filters, like say for example is on Wikipedia. Now what that involves, let me explain what that involves. We might, for example, go and find 200 para swimming pools and fill them up with gravel. And what you do with the gravel is you pour the effluent over the top of it, and within that gravel, and this is the way, by the way, the trickle filters used to work in the city. We used to just have big piles of gravel, and we used to just pour the effluent over the top of them, and the Bromleys that do magic work grow on the surface area of the gravel. Now, because we have a population of 405,000 people, we obviously can't build this stuff on a small scale like we used to. And because the existing trickle filters are 7 metres high, times 2, times 50 plus metres across, that means if we're going to build these out of para pools, we're going to need quite a few of them, we're going to need a lot of gravel, we're going to need a lot of...
You've got ponds out there, so you've got 2 ponds. Cut them in half, fill them up, start using it that way. It's all good to have theory, wisdom things going on, but we need a fast answer.
Okay, so your solution is essentially to say, yes, as a community we want to spend money to reorganise we want councillors to give staff authority to spend more money, to be more creative with redeploying some of the existing assets we've got. Damien, go.
Are we suggesting that this is an insurance claim? Why should we be liable for the payments for a temporary system to put in place?
We didn't insure against that. We just didn't insure for that. We've got $10 million that we put aside that is in the insurance claim for interruption and continuation, and that's it. We've spent 6 already.
I've got 120,000 insurance on my car. They still give me this lease car to carry on.
Yep, but the question we've got obviously is an insurance question. So that actually is a new question. Is anyone taking notes of questions? Steve, you got that one in your head? We have actually asked, one of the things, Damien, that I have asked for several times, and so I know Stephen from the press is going to nod at me in a minute when I ask him the question, because I'm sure you've asked him as well, the details of the insurance claim, so we can better understand. Yeah, Stephen is sitting here nodding at me. And that has been declined for commercial interests reasons, and also around public interest reasons. There's not enough interest from the public. Yes, Vicky.
I would like to ask, the trickle filters, they've got core samples from them. I want to know if they've come back that they're going to reinstate those trickling filters, or they're going to bowl them over. Because if they can bowl them over, they can clear the whole lot of it out and start again tomorrow.
Okay.
And they could be building, if they're going to reinstate, they could be building those roofs and getting on with the process of getting the stuff that they need to put inside them once they're cleared, so that they can run again, and then we can be back to what we were beforehand.
Okay. A couple of us have actually canvassed this question a number of times, and certainly my friends and I hold the opinion that the concrete walls are simply a curtain around a structure that holds filter material over which you pour effluent. The curtain itself isn't the problem. The problem is the filter material inside that. One of the biggest problems we've got, as I see it, is we've yet to actually hear that they have, well, actually we know they haven't agreed on a new filter material at this stage. Once they agree on that, they've then got to order it, and if it's anything like the pumps that are coming from Sweden, bear in mind the pumps coming from Sweden are probably going to fit in a box that would fit behind me. The filter material is 26,000 cubic metres, so we won't be bringing that in an aeroplane.
Why can't it be made here?
Damien.
I think the other thing we all must understand is this is a $90 million insurance policy with only $10 million accepted. The rest of it is still in communication. So for something to happen tomorrow, forget about it. For something to happen next year, forget about it. And I can tell you right now, sit and wait probably 3 years before anything happens. And that's a serious thing to think about.
And that's like everything to the council at the moment.
I tend to agree with you, Damien. I actually gave a bit of thought, and I did see a hand go up in the back there, so we will come to that in a second. That 90 million, Damien, actually that 105 million, what does that equate to each? So what's your share on a population of 405,000 people? Have you done that maths? No, I did. It's $265, I think, per person. So every one of us in the room, I've got 3 in my house, I need to find roughly $900. Tell you what, if you want $900, I'll go down to the ATM right now, councillors, and get you my $900 rather than worry about dicking around with the insurance claims. Because frankly, the stench in my bedroom is worth more to me than the $900 that it will cost my family to get the stench out of my house. Right, question down the back. Oh.
Kia ora, it's point man, I live in Woolston and I work in Wainui, and I've just got some questions around testing, but I wanted to say about figuring out how to pay for it and how to take quick actions. Look, there are people who are paid 2 to 4 times as much as I'm paid, who work in Hereford Street, who are paid to figure this stuff out.
Yep.
And it's our job as a community to say that we want them to figure it out and to reprioritise stuff. Like, we don't have to do their jobs for them. But in terms of testing, like, I want to know why we're smelling the rotten egg smell of hydrogen sulfide, but the testing isn't picking up at every sample site, because they should be picking it up much lower than the odour threshold. And I wonder if that implies the testing is not sensitive or accurate enough. And so how can we trust the results? And I also want to know, is it the same company using the same techniques and the same instruments being used to test the odour from the organics processing plant?
Yes, probably.
Because we all know how accurate that has been.
Yeah.
You know, so I want to know if they're testing for all the substances they should be, and if they can report in the different types of units so that it's easily convertible for the general public. So micrograms per cubic metre as well as parts per billion, and they should have parts per million too, just to make it understandable or more understandable for everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to pick those up from the end forwards, and Damien, don't walk too far with that microphone because you're answering half of this question. Yeah, I'm going to drop you in it, brother, because you were all over this earlier today. That's a comms question, and I agree with you that the comms department don't have enough resource on it yet, clearly, to translate. We've already had this problem, parts per million, parts per billion. I mean, it's absolutely alarming that we have 107 parts per million of a very deadly gas in the environment, when Rach tells us online that that stuff is really dangerous at 20 parts per billion. And then we realised that in fact it's 107 parts per million, per billion, not million, which is a fraction of what is a health risk, but just enough to be really, really annoying, like 50 times past being annoying. And it wasn't well translated in the results that we got from the testers. Okay, so let's talk about the testers. In the first instance, the testing was done by a company whose details are actually all on the council's published test results. So you can go to the website for that company, you can see the profile of the guy who runs the company, you can see his mobile phone number on there, and you can give him a ring and personally talk to him. And on his website, he claims to be the guy that also was involved in the Pike River mine stuff. So, what does that mean? Did the government just bring in the same guy to cover up over the other side of the hill, or let's put our tinfoil hats on and make a conspiracy theory up? I just don't know. But the information is there, the person is there as much as I am in the room. You can ask the questions.
Is it the same company?
Sounds like they used to me.
I think I heard someone say yes somewhere there. Right, Damien, what was that you said about where Damien and I were having a bit of a chat, and his opinion or comment he made to me the other day is that he was observing, because he lived just across the road from the ponds, so he was observing these guys driving around the area, and he certainly raised questions as to whether they're looking for ideal places to test so they get the results they want. Now, to me, what that really speaks to is Damien is ringing me and telling me he has no confidence in these people. He has no trust in these people. And the point that came up today was a question of, do we need an independent auditor? And frankly, I don't know who we call on that we do trust to independently audit this stuff. Who do we actually have in the community that we believe, that we have confidence in? Yeah, go on.
But tests like that need to be, usually you don't be tested in an accredited laboratory, an IANZ accredited laboratory.
Yep, so,
Not on site, by the people.
Not on
that
site,
are
easy.
trained.
yeah,
The health people will just deliver the air quality stuff and gave it to the employees, and they were used to test it. So no, I believe that they haven't got any qualifications to do it myself.
yeah. Okay, so I know that the council does have a full lab facility out here in Bromley. I know that they do have a degree of people on site with some good skills. I know that because I had Christmas dinner with these people. Sorry?
They're just looking after the council. You say that. You're saying that they've got people on site, but their job is to work with the council, not independent.
Yeah, they certainly aren't there representing your views. If we accept the position that this is a bad plant operator, that let the place go bang, and that's my point, that from a confidence point of view, I think the question in the room and the point to be made to the members, the elected members, to communicate back through to staff is that we don't trust them, and they need to fix that problem. We are the ones paying for the services, and we don't trust them currently, and they haven't done enough to actually re-attain our trust. I did also throw this exact ball straight at ECAN this afternoon. I rang them this afternoon and let them go away and have a think about that. I'll give you a heads up, I also had ECAN. Who's used the smell attack? Okay, who has not used the smell attack? Who knows where the smell attack was built and who built it? Because I've spent half the week talking to that development company. And there's a lot of content there in that all the comments that people make when they make reports, those are actually available. We can see how many reports have been made, we can see when those reports have been made. So if we wanted to, we could match that up with their data. However, sir, I'd like to come back to your questions around testing. One of my concerns is, and I have communicated this afternoon to Sean at the council, is that I believe that our testers need to go and hunt this stuff down. I think that Damien's comment that they seem to be picking where they test to get the best result, I think they should be actually aggressively out there in the community using their noses to find the stench and then measure what's actually in the air at that point and tell us the worst of the worst results. Personally, that would give me more confidence that they mark on a map where they've tested, what they found at that point, what their personal observations were at that point. I don't feel like, at present, I agree with you guys, I don't feel like they're actually trying to identify where the problems are. But I also have to throw another question back to the community. What are we actually trying to achieve from that? We know that this stuff makes us feel ill. And once we're at that point, what we need to do is go and seek medical advice.
Hi, Don.
Hey, Michael.
Earlier on, you touched on, I think you're absolutely on the money, mate. It's about the health. It's about the health. Now, I'd like to know, have we set up a health registrar of all the people that live in the area, or say the immediately affected area?
No.
We don't know how many people are in those houses. We don't
No.
know the ethnicity, the age groups, the children.
No.
Do the council intend to set up a health register?
Not that I'm aware of.
It looks absolutely fundamental. You have an incident involving asbestos or whatever it is. You know, you set up a health register and you follow it through. You make it a long time study. But one of the things I think we can do is use the health for residents, and I'm seeing many more residents complaining about just not feeling right, you know, and other quite serious concerns as well. That we use the health issues to drive the council to actually become more reactive.
Agreed. How do we do that, Michael?
Well, I think we need to set up we need people to go out in the community and set up a health register. And I think it wouldn't hurt as a direction from residents here tonight that we actually tell the council that they must work on setting up a health register, and this is to be done emergency. I mean, we just don't know what's really going on out there. I would have thought they would have been absolutely beside themselves about looking after the health of the community. So we set up a register, and then we get people down, and we have an understanding of how many.
Sorry, we get people down. Where are we taking these people?
The army, bring the army. No, what I'm saying is we bring in, the council needs to bring in people who can set up a health register and go through the community in the circle of the people that are affected and record their details, age, group, etc., number of people in the household, because there may be long-term health consequences to this that should be recorded now. We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody seems to know. And the ear, I've done quite a bit of work with a company called Matters and seeing them testing. It's absolutely critical that work at this level is better reviewed. So I'm not sure how that process works, but I mean, quite often you can take stuff out to the university and they'll actually work on it, you know, free of charge.
Okay, so essentially what you're talking about is involving the primary health provider, which in this area is the Pegasus Medical Group. Essentially, this is about getting people into Greek general practitioners where we can triage people to understand whether their concern is an existing health condition that's been inflamed, an existing health condition or a new health condition that has absolutely nothing to do with the odour situation, or a health condition that is directly caused and can be linked with correlation or needs further investigation, which is why the City Council are looking at the first 3,000 homes, asking the question of inviting the public to come forward and collect some money so they can pay for those doctors' visits. That's my basic understanding of what we're going to look at. At present, that package is going to be presented to elected members on Thursday, who will hopefully agree that what has been proposed by staff is what will happen. And then following that, there are going to be, as I understand it, a number of centres are being talked about being set up around the eastern suburbs, where people will be able to come down and put in those statements of claim and essentially start to work through some of what you're talking about. Michael, something else you may or may not be aware of as well is that all of the health information about doctors' visits is actually digitally collected today and analysed in great detail by Pegasus Medical Group, who then feed that information back through to the District Health Board, who then feed that information back up into the government, which is why I've been repeatedly saying to people, just every time someone pops up on social media saying, oh, my nose is running, my eyes are itchy, I'm going, I know it doesn't sound too serious, but please go and see your doctor. And the reason for that is that the bean counters at Pegasus, if they see an opportunity to go and get some more money off the government for their doctors, they will, and they'll use that health information to do that.
Right. Yep, I'm still absolutely adamant about having a health register. I think it's critical. You've got a number of transient type people in the community, and we need a longevity study to be able to follow those people.
Agreed. So, Steve, did you catch that? I think we're going to have to go through this video and between a bunch of us figure out, because that's actually quite a good suggestion, is to ask the Boffins at council whether they can do the IT support to create a database. If that's not already available, Alex, are you madly? Alex is making notes. I love it.
Just on the testing, one of the reasons why I think it's important is because, like, we need some kind of objective basis to assess how to allocate the funding. But I think it doesn't make sense to go wide and everybody who might smell it sometimes, like people over at Hallswell or something, get a little help. Like people who live in Bromley. Now I live in Wilson and I work in Waimea and I smell it a lot, but it's not like it is here. I ride my bike through here. And so people who live close definitely get more support. And if we know what the gas levels are, there's some kind of objective basis to allocate need rather than, drawing boundary lines and roads or something as they have. And at the moment, I don't have much faith, and I don't think it's good reason to not have that much faith in the results of those tests. And they're not testing widely.
How much Panadol do you take when you have a headache?
What do you mean?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Some people will take half a tablet, some people will take 2. I ask the question because different people will react differently to the chemicals. The current levels that are in this area, I can personally walk into a building that's methamphetamine contaminated, and I can tell you it's methamphetamine contaminated, whereas I've got friends that are just going, oh, what's your problem? Because it makes me feel sick within minutes of being in there. And I think that part of the response is not just a minimum bar. We saw that with the work safe levels, where they're saying, oh, it's safe in an 8-hour working day. Whereas those of us that are living in the space know damn well that with 24-hour exposure, and depending on your kidneys and liver and lungs' ability to process this mess, some people are going to feel worse than others. So yes, we do need to know more about what's in the air, and I think we've got every right to ask that question and to question that testing and ask the council to put more into it. I mean, this business, for example, of we're going to test once a week on a certain day, and then we're going to fly it under Hamilton. Why aren't we doing that twice a day? Who's got an EFOS card here? Put your hand up if you've got an EFOS card here.
What I was saying before, sorry.
Can I just hold that thought for you? I've worked with banks who do backups twice a day, and for earthquake reasons, they fly their backups. Before we have fibre, we fly them up and down the country in case we have to bring a computer system online. Now, I mention this because, from a testing point of view, why is the council not able to fly this testing up to a test lab and start that testing so we get new test results released twice a day from, say, 5 days ago?
What I was saying was, quite often at the university, they love getting projects like this. Let's reach out to the university and see if there's anybody looking for this or whatever, and let's see if they can start peer reviewing and having a bit of what's going on for us as well.
Agreed. So you're talking about a community-led initiative where we just say to the council, we don't care what you do.
Listen, we can reach out to the university as a community-based initiative and ask if they've got any students that would be interested in doing what I'm doing, or whatever, where we can add this in and have them peer review what's in the air.
Sounds like a plan for Sam Johnson. Yeah, Alex is nodding and making a note. Thanks.
Just from online, they're saying that the package is aimed at residents and not at businesses. There are a lot of small traders in the area that are now struggling because of what's happening. What support packages will there be for the local businesses?
Yep, and that's an issue that I know that Alex is sitting in the front row. For those that don't know Alex, she's the chair of the local community board and a community board member in the area for Linwood, if I recall correctly. Yes. Alex actually forwarded me an email this afternoon from one of the social media group followers, actually outlining exactly that. There are also volunteer organisations in the area that are impacted. So our social support network across the east is going to start to fail at some point. And that will happen because the volunteers aren't willing to turn up in the space, obviously. And when that happens, the obvious onset of lack of support means that we rise up crime. So that in itself also gives us a policing problem, which is why I have taken 2 opportunities this week to put that issue on the radar of the police and ask if they're seeing any concerns about rising crime and family violence incidents across the city.
Bruce Kim here.
Yeah, Bruce King, I'm a resident of Bromley.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello, John. There's just 2 things I would like to know. What they're going to do for the people who have got
It died.
for the people who have got problems with their throats and stuff for breathing and lungs, for the long-term exposure to the sulfuric acid that when we breathe these gases in, what it turns to, and what funds our council is putting aside for people when our roofs start to rust out in the next 3 or 4 years for having sulfuric acid attack them, especially on the carriages. That's going to be very expensive. The average household today to re-roof is between $30,000 and $40,000. So imagine how many people are exposed to that in 3 or 4 years when the acid is attacking the roofs, what it's going to cost the people in here. It's going to cost more than $1 billion, so why haven't we had some feedback and some help? Why isn't this place being closed down as a health hazard, which it should have been done in November when this stuff started happening? Why hasn't the City Council declared a state of emergency? A state of emergency and brought in the government experts to close it, stop the exposure that we're having here. 8 hours a day of the minimum standards from the health system of this country. 24 hours a day is bloody shocking, and it's just a typical thing on this city council. I'm sorry, it's not the councillors, it's the people who work in the council who aren't feeding through the correct information, in my opinion. They cover things up so the egg doesn't sit on their faces.
And again, it comes back that we're in the eastern suburbs. So, and it really doesn't matter, because I think there's nobody in here from Fendleton or Merivale that lives over here, and it all comes back down to where we're living.
I think taking into consideration, just quickly, these people in this room are the ones who care today. The ones on the social media watching are the ones who care today. The ones who were here last time cared last time. And the reality is we're all trying to work together. Don's doing a great job, you people are doing a great job, and it's a question we've got for the council. We've all had an opportunity to put it into the council, and I think we all need to keep on to the council. But the reality is there's a million questions.
So, can I pose a question?
The council sat here last week and said that this problem will be fixed by the 1st of September. What are they like?
That's only the trickling filters.
They seem to think would be disappearing in March too.
So, my question is, did the city council know that those pumps that they needed, why weren't they ordered 7 months ago? Why are they being ordered this week to come from Plymouth, Sweden?
Which is going to
And of course, there's no way this smell is going to be gone. No way in the world. And I reckon, as that man said before, 3 years. I think that the council must have known last week that those pumps were ordered.
They did, and
And they are just putting things behind the line. As I said, I work at the local school. We have health issues at that school that I have never seen before. having seizures. I do not know why they're having seizures. We have children who are constantly away from school. You talk about taking Panadol. As we know, medically, Panadol does nothing for a headache. It is medically proven that Panadol does not work. There are so many sick people out there. I keep coming back to it. Why are they not covering this place? Cover the building until they can get some control over what is happening.
I think the first answer to your question is because I think most people in the room, and certainly across the internet, seem to agree that the problem is not the treatment filters, it's the ponds. And we can't cover the ponds. That's, which is why I raised the question to staff earlier today, can we flush the ponds? We've got 128 wells across the city, bores down to the 200 metre aquifer. We have any amount of water flowing into them at this time of the year from the Alps, so there's no reason why they can't run the ponds, literally put fire hoses into the sewer system across the city and run water out into these things to give them dam flush. We lose more than 118 million litres of water across the network in 3 days.
There's probably about 10 wells already at the bottom of the pond, because when they built those ponds, which I can remember them being built, they blocked off the wells that were there. Correct.
If the wells are blocked off, then we're not going to be able to turn it back on.
Yes, they know where they are. They can uncap them.
Yes.
I'm Kevin Slipper, still on Bromley.
Do you want to wait till he's got a microphone? Because I can't hear him myself.
Yeah, you ready? Yeah, Kevin Slipper here, 44 Outpost.
Hey, Kevin.
Oh, wait, good to meet you. Like, when they do the testing for the software and all that sort of stuff, they're taking swabs. Because I cleaned out the windows 3 days ago, and now they're just disgusting and filthy.
Yep.
And after the rain, it's like, oh, when you look at the barbecue table outside, things like that, it's just, it's not nice. We've also got the animals, the dogs, the cats, they can live inside. There's no way I'm going to put them out there.
Yeah, the animals question I've heard discussed with Gary from council, who's putting together this $1 million package.
Yep.
It wasn't an issue that he initially thought of, but he has completely acknowledged that we're going to need to cover some vet bills. It's going to have to be accepted that some vet bills are going to, there is going to be assistance with vet bills.
Yeah.
He acknowledged that point to me again yesterday when I spoke to him for about a half an hour.
Like, it's not just the vet bills, it's like the animals living inside, so you've got your carpet cleaning and, you know, your bedding and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, round 2 I suggest to you. I don't know about you guys, but when they're done with this $1 million next week, as soon as that starts getting underway and into the community, and that one's off Gary's plate, my next call is going to be, right, let's go for $5 million, and here's a list of why we want it. And I'm going to be looking at the likes of Sam McDonald, who is the Deputy Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee, who is the gentleman who went through that stadium budget and discovered that they got it wrong. I'm going to be asking him, and I think all of you should be asking him via social media to look at these budgets and figure out where we find the next $5 million. And after we're done with that $5 million, I think we're going after another $10 million. Frankly, I think this is a $200 million problem because of the number of homes that are going to need repainting, the number of carpets that are going to need to be sorted out, and we're already hearing back from our insurance companies that this stuff is not covered. Yes, sir.
yeah. I brought a radio here last year, and that's like all the frames starting to rust out. I've got a grill that was put on 2 months ago that's already starting to rust out.
Photos, I cannot stress important to me enough.
Yeah,
take photos and publish them online.
But what happened, okay, sweet, they pay for that, then another 6 months' time it looks like shit again.
That's right.
Agreed, which is why I
Do we just keep going Thank you. Do we just keep going around in circles and letting these pricks drag their feet over and over again and discover insane in the process?
Yeah, I agree, which is why I raised the question, and we all need to endorse the council flushing the ponds so we get this lot
There's a pipeline that runs out from those ponds about 2.5 km out to the ocean that they can just drop there and start again.
I agree.
We know them 20 years ago. What goes on in those ponds is bacteria and sunlight that stop that from smelling. Dump the whole lot, start again.
Agreed.
Yeah. It's not, none of this is rocket science.
Agreed.
These guys.
It's not rocket science, I agree with you. It's really simple fish tank maintenance, isn't it?
Pretty much, that is exactly how that works.
And the guy that says to me he's not prepared to engage with anyone anymore until he's invited, he runs a massive room of fish tanks bigger than this room. And it is just exactly that, it is fish tank science.
So you can't put hydrogen peroxide in fish tanks and make it smell go away?
No,
Because the bacteria in it,
I would think so.
That's why they had these focus.
Yep, that's why I raised the question, do we want to call on council to find a budget and spend the money to build some temporary ones out of swimming pools or whatever, or as you say, go and take a section of the ponds and fill it full of shingle. There's plenty of people in the space. I mean, this is just the idea that comes to mind for me because I did a little bit of Googling. That there are better minds in this city than mine that actually understand and have actually worked in the stuff. We had people at the last meeting who put up their hand and said, I worked on this plant back in 1965. Maybe we need to consult those guys. Sorry, sir, I'm waffling and the learned gentleman is quite correct. I should shut up sometime.
Another question. Since they turned the aerators on, which was what, 2 months ago?
Yeah.
I reckon this smell's got basically worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're saying that the oxidation and the chemicals and equipment through is going to take 6 to 8 weeks. So it doesn't seem to be doing much of an extent. So maybe that's another thing you can sort of look at. What sort of disabled is that causing more of the problem?
Yeah, I think you're a little bit out on the timeline at present. That you are correct. My understanding of what they said lines up with yours. However, they were delayed with getting the stuff started. They didn't have the pumps initially. When they got the pumps, they didn't have a power supply in place. They got the power supply in place. They brought 2 of 4, or is it 4 of 8 online? They now have 8 of 8 online.
Yeah.
It may well be that we're going to have to wait a bit longer to see what those actually achieve and whether what they're actually managing to produce in those ponds will actually impact what they push out into the oxidation ponds. Again, those are actually questions for the technical head of Three Waters, who was here at the last meeting, did answer a number of questions, but really there are a lot more involved, more technical questions than we're currently getting answers from. And what they seem to be currently focusing on is just improving the comms around the triple filter clearing space. But literally, Stephen will nod his head again. As fast as we're putting in questions, we're starting to get different answers on subjects coming back, which is why you're seeing quite so many articles come back from Stephen, in my opinion.
No, who's the way, right? Who's the way? Because I look at the structure of how we're working. We've got community residents, and we've got some people like yourself who need a slightly different structure where we have people that are well clued up that actually go in and approach and maybe start reporting back to us. Like our people are sort of like at a tier 2 level. You know, I mean, I've done a lot of organising work for unionism and that. That's one thing you have is that second tier of people, the experts that are committed and prepared to put that time in. But there's so much stuff going on, and we just, it feels as if we're just going down in circles. That's what it looks like.
I'll go nuts if I try and run a Facebook page all by myself.
No, I'm not saying what I'm saying. Do we need to have a structure of actual people that are actually maybe directed with with the director that comes from here, from the residents, and sit down and vote and work out who they want to represent them, and have these people going directly to the council to try and get a more consistent feedback than what we're getting currently. I mean, like I said, at this stage, it's all about trickle filters. But we've got all these health questions going on. We've got where are they testing? All these questions going on. And, you know, do we need that second tier to go and...
Well, I kind of suggest to you that that's what our community boards are supposed to do. Which is why we have got some community board representatives in the room. With us. Well, we've got Alex, we've got Councillor Yanni is in the room with us. Celeste is in the room. Sorry, Celeste, you're new at the table, and I keep seeing James down every time I see your smile.
And Jackie Simons is unwell, but she would be here tonight.
Yeah, and Kim Money, is she still in the room? Is she still in the room, Kim? Are you hiding? Away in the back here, as a community board member. As far as the social media side of things go, Steve has been fielding all sorts of, just in the background, he's been building bits of website. We've got someone who's looking after work and income inquiries and also looking at timesheets. So that, because one of the things that we were pledged was a lot of attention to this exercise, and we want to know how often these contractors are turning up for 12-hour days. We've got a couple of people who are helping with swatting the flies of spammers. We seem to have been attacked with a few of those today. We've got a growing number of social media groups that are responding directly to media inquiries. We've got folk who we've had every media outlet in the country. Every time we have a meeting, all our phones keep going. We have regular phone calls between the likes of Vicky, Damien, Stephen and myself, and Michael, of course, just reaching out to people. I sort of, Michael, to answer your question, I sort of feel like the way you run these things is you sort of see who wants to step up to the plate, and you bring those people together. I've got a lot of my background is actually in open source development, software development, and working with open source teams, which really is all on a volunteer basis a lot of the time. Sometimes projects are sponsored, sometimes people are paid to be involved. So you sort of just have to work with people who want to show up and want to do something, and figure out how you empower those people with the resources that are necessary to achieve the things that need doing.
And congratulations on the media campaign, by the way, it's been brilliant.
I tell you what,
one of the best I've ever seen.
I tell you what, it just makes me want to break down and cry, but in fact, if we're going to break down and cry, yes, Vicky Walker, stand up, take a bow, and show us the tears. Because I tell you what, I turned up when I saw Vicky Walker in a press article in tears. And that to me, and Stephen McPack will tell you, Steve, tell us all how I met you. You did it earlier tonight.
Sorry, I'll just turn the camera around. I don't really want to be on camera, but I had.
Dropped in a break.
Thanks. 2019, I was living in a cold, damp, council-owned unit. I went to a council meeting as a mayoral candidate, and I handed over my $200 deposit for a candidacy, and walked into the council meeting, made a deputation, and walked out with $16 million for better heating and warmer, drier units for council-owned people.
Okay, so what Stephen really means is 2,000 homes across the city got a brand new heat pump in them. And anyone bought a heat pump recently, they're worth more than $1,000, and we're talking about 3,000 homes getting a share of less than $1 million. By the time we also give money, where's Kathy? Is it Kathy from the school? Sorry? She had to leave. I think if the number serves me correctly, there are 23 23 schools that are impacted by this. And that was one of the concerns that Gary raised, is by the time we carve out some money for those, the amount left for residents is, yes, Damien.
So you're telling me 23 schools are within that zone where they're saying there's 3,000 people?
No, I'm saying there are 23 schools that Gary has identified are impacted, if the number serves me correctly. Don't quote me, but Alex is madly writing down a note because she's going to follow that up and find out how many schools are. The eyebrows are going up, she knows what I'm asking, she's going to be all over it. And Celeste has got a big list of questions she's going to be asking in that question session, haven't you, Celeste?
Well, doing a health register, perhaps we should start from the schools. You know, start from our most vulnerable. Start from the schools.
So that's part of the reason why the hubs are being set up, because the issue for schools is how that's resourced. But what we haven't seen yet, Michael, is we haven't actually seen what instruction the council is going to be giving the hubs. The council is giving the hubs a tranche of money to pay for people on the ground. Exactly what they're doing, we haven't seen that body of work at this stage. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't even been presented to councillors in draft form. Yanni, would you like to comment? Have you seen a draft of that? No.
Sorry, I've got lots of questions, Tom, as well. And just to say that,
pass him a mic.
I mean, the point has been said before, right? And I made it last report we had at council when one of the staff members said that we need to be aware of the well-being of ratepayers' money. Actually, what far exceeds the cost to ratepayers is the health of the local and well-being of the local community, right? And that's the point I made.
Well, that's going to be taxpayer if we don't get that.
I would continue to make it. I totally agree that this is a disaster. It needs a disaster response, which is what I've been pushing council to do from almost day one. In terms of the health and well-being, there's a number of meetings going on, but there's no transparency. So when ECAN, CHP and council meet, when you ask for what's the outcome of those meetings, you're told that they've agreed to have meetings and joint action, but you're not given what those actions are. There's a very good example post-earthquake of what they call a natural environmental recovery program, and that's what we need for this. We need an action plan that the community can input into and see what's been agreed to be done with timeframes and key responsibilities of who's involved and who's taking the lead and how much it's costing. Yes, there will be a cost, but that cost is not at the expense of the local health and well-being of the local communities that are impacted. I firmly believe that. So what I'm pushing the council to do is to actually come up with a plan that you can see that you have visibility. I do think it's important to have some sort of community liaison group that can meet regularly with council staff, the technical people that are working on it, to look through and make sure that the information that's going out is addressing the questions and concerns that local people have. We did that with the Port Falls Red Zone. We did it with the flooding. This is no different. This is a major disaster, and it requires the expertise of the local community to inform the response, not the community simply to be told what the response is, and then still have a lot of questions in my view.
Well done, Yanni.
Okay, so, Yanni, if I'm understanding.
I'd like to nominate our community liaison lead on this. How do you feel about that? We need somebody who's in there, for a good technical understanding, and come back and support the community.
But it needs a group of 5 or 6 people from the affected communities that meet regularly with elected members and staff to come up with the agreed actions and to monitor the progress, right?
I can do that. And you can reach out to people who you think might be able to work on.
I do community organising for a job. I do it around reducing harm to young people from alcohol and other drugs in the community. And like the media campaign and stuff and bringing attention to this has been fantastic. And thank you to those. But change comes from numbers of people.
Yes.
It's not, like this is, at the moment, it's a pain for the council, but numbers of people is what creates change. So, I'm happy to be involved. Not really, so.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about it? You like to go down the liaison approach? I think we need sharpening, we need to be able to stick pencil in your eye and get your attention, mate.
So, I mean, just on so just on Thursday, there's going to be, and Don's made this point at the start, there's going to be hundreds of questions, I would imagine, from elected members. A number of us have, when we've seen the package, fed in a huge amount of different things that need doing still, right? This is not the end of a process. This is absolutely the beginning of recognising that there's a need for support, and there's things that have been put in place, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I've still got a list of outstanding stuff from the last meeting that we had. Like, one of the things that people want is a workshop with the contractor to explain the methodology of what they're doing there. And, that needs to happen. Someone needs to talk with the insurance council and the insurance companies to get a very simple and clear process for people to engage with their insurers around what things are covered, what things are not, and what things can get support. I've put forward, people probably don't recall, but NIWA actually had a system in Rangiora in 2018 where they put individual monitors in people's houses to monitor air quality, right? That needs to happen here because people are concerned in their own homes, what are they breathing in when they're inside, right? Through the night. There's technology that should be available that can be put in place.
Can you stop for just one second?
Yeah.
Alex, can you make a note of that NIWA? Because I have a NIWA contact. We need to do a show.
Anyway.
Sorry, keep going, Yanni.
There's the practical information that people need around the destruction, the damage that's been caused to people's properties, which I've personally gone and had a look at. The black filters that's appearing on woodwork, there may be other stuff that's happening as well. People need to get advice, professional advice around what it is. It needs to be sampled. Someone's made that point. I understand staff are making contact with some residents to go and get some samples taken and to look at what can be done to address it. Anyway, I don't want to go on because I think the important thing today, or tonight, is to recognise that the report is going on Thursday. It's really important that we as elected members hear the concerns you have with what's been proposed and things that you want us to add in for consideration, right? I think that's got to be the focus of tonight. That this is an ongoing process, and it is, it's just, I do want to acknowledge Vicky actually for coming to that council meeting. When we managed finally, after many attempts by us as local elected reps to get a regular report to council, I sent it through to Vicky, I put it on the Facebook and said to people, please come and talk to council about what you're going through. It's important that council hears directly from you how this is impacting. And Vicky took the courage to do that, and that's what's kicked off this rolling process of regular updates. And you've also come on board with the community meetings, and I just want to acknowledge all the people that have worked, to put these community meetings together, to support each other, and to raise the serious concerns that have been raised.
Thanks, Yanni. And I'd like to add to that an endorsement of what Michael just said. When I broke in a moment ago, I was going to, you proposed an idea that, as far as I'm concerned, I think we just heard Yanni endorse with slightly different words, but essentially it's the same idea. Then we've got a third gentleman here in the pink shirt whose name, I'm sorry, is it Paul? Paul, yeah. Paul has stepped up and said, yes, he's got experience with this stuff and highlighted some points. So I think we've got a massive job of going back through the video feed from tonight, and when this meeting is done, there is another meeting with council in 2 weeks, and clearly we're going to have to show up with some deputations. And I agree with what Yanni's saying. I will be making a deputation on Thursday. There are currently 3 people plus myself making a deputation in council. Over in Hornby they got a swimming pool because they sent a busload of 60 people into council, and that makes a difference. They got another, I don't know how many million, to add 5,000 seats to a stadium, bring it up from 25 to 30,000 seats because of a petition with 24,000 signatures on it. That is what influences decisions across the council table when collectives turn up, not when weaky obnoxious wheels like me turn up. Yes, sir.
I'd like to endorse what Yanni said about a plan. I want to say, I asked a couple of weeks ago at the meeting, I asked for a plan. Was it a plan?
Yeah.
There was a plan put up on the screen that I looked. I think it might be just the contractor's plan, but I want to see a plan from the council from here on into the end of the project. What the council are going to do, what they're going to do once the plan has been accomplished. And I think you've got it up on the Facebook page. So right from now till the close of the project, what the council is going to do and when they're going to do it.
The problem with that is they don't have the ability in the council to act in that manner.
Well, look, I've been in places when I was working that we were able to plan a project on implementing software, and we were able to do it right from the start of the plan, from the very first day of the project, right to the last day of the project, when the project was going to be fully implemented and up and running. So I think the council should be able to have a plan that they can show us. Maybe there's things that will come up that they can put it back, but have a plan, at least have a plan.
I quite agree, sir, but what I'm saying is the council do not have staff with the ability to do that.
I agree, yes sir, thank you, yeah, I fully agree with you.
Okay, so council don't have the ability to do that. Does anyone have a suggestion on who we should call in to facilitate the creation of a public-facing plan? Effectively, what you're asking for is a Gantt chart like the one the council did create, which I've got on the screen currently, which shows you the milestones, it shows you the things to do, the dates, should show you where we're actually up to in the plan. What you're asking for is a public planning tool with a public planner to be funded by council to do this work.
Yeah, because it's not just the trickle filters, I mean, let's get that out, we want the ponds, we want everything.
It's a recovery
plan.
Sorry, Yanni?
It's a recovery plan. It's not just about the trickling filters. It's about health. It's about education. It's about well-being. It's about financial support. It covers a wide range of things. It's not. That's been the problem in my view today. Is that the focus has been very technical on the plant, the operations. It needs an overall recovery plan that has many different streams to it, with different departments doing different things. Right? Ministry of Education, CEHB, Ministry of Health, ECAN, everyone has a role to play. And people made this point earlier in this meeting. The best thing we can do is to get everyone working together to get this problem fixed as fast as possible. If that's central government, private, contractors, companies, whatever. So many people want to offer their help, but there needs to be a plan so people can see what has been covered, and if things aren't being covered in that plan, it gives the community an ability to say, actually, animals, for example, one thing that was raised tonight, which I haven't heard before, that needs to be added. Someone needs to take responsibility, and it needs to be delivered on.
I have two feelings in response to that, Jan. One is that I haven't been listening to you, and secondly, I haven't endorsed you, because I think you're right, and I think that I wasn't spending enough time listening and endorsing what you've had to say in council. And I think there are a few members around the table who have not been listening to your advice either. And I think we need to, as a community, step up and start to listen a bit more, because I think the feeling that I'm getting in the room right now is there isn't a person who doesn't agree with Yanni, with what he just said.
Because he said everything that needs to be said.
Can I please ask a question? Before you said, we have got people doing this, people doing that, people doing other things. Who is the we?
All of us. As in, when I meant that, I mean...
Is it an organisation or what?
No, sir. It works the same way as open source development. we are all part of that community.
Whoever puts their hands up helps, and it will drop them in the pool.
So if someone steps up to say, I want to do something, then I listen.
So you're the okay.
I am just one person on the Facebook social media space. I created it, but I immediately appointed 3 other people to be admins of it. So if I decide to get run over by a bus, somebody else, Stephen, Vicky, and Jen, I think is the other admin, can just continue running that, and it's grown a life of its own, and it will continue. Yes, down the back.
Thanks, Don. Kim Money. I just want to congratulate everybody that's here tonight on being bold and coming forward, but I'd just like to say that what I see tonight and what I'm hearing tonight, I totally agree with Yanni's absolutely fantastic, but I see that from my experience in community issues and work is that there's always an imbalance of power. So the community are doing exactly what they've done when it comes to an issue, and they're rallying around, they're exhausted, they're affected by the issue, but what they're not getting and what council doesn't provide for them, and this is to do with the trust issues that the community have with council, is that council don't provide community with their own chosen experts. Now I see this group come together, and Don, there's a huge responsibility on you, and all credit to you and his team, that you've gathered around you, but I believe there needs to be a request that goes along and complements what Yanni says. There needs to be that request to council that they fund, not within the $1 million, because for sure that is just not enough, but they resource experts of the group in the community that choose what they need and who they need to sit with them to champion and to make sure that the council is accountable and transparent. Because it's a huge ask to ask the community that are affected that have a certain amount of expertise to be understanding and comprehending and moving forward, seeing a way forward for the council. So I would be asking as a group that they resource experts of your choosing to help make sure that they're accountable and transparent in the way that you want to move forward with the needs that you are requiring at this time. Because it is going to be huge. It's going to be a long time to recovery, but it could be sped up if you've got the right help.
Thanks, Kim. Who's next?
Over here from social media, from Joe Trask. Sorry if I got the name wrong. Air purifiers were brought and they're expensive. I'm a single parent, I work full time and own my own home. I have a large living space and need 2 air purifiers with no guarantee they will work. Plus it would increase my power bill. Once the issue is fixed and I'm left with the things I don't need anymore, with the cost of living increasing, I cannot justify the cost of buying something so expensive I will only need for short term. What are the help we're going to get to fight the smell in our homes?
Well, I can tell you, the HRV ear socks don't work. No. Sorry, they don't work. I had them installed last week and nah, came home tonight with it. So the air purifier's on. That did work. And I've got a Breville bottom of the line thing for $295 delivered from Bromley, and it is very good. So that's what I'm looking at the moment.
It's got quite a large active charcoal filter in that unit. I did actually do a video at Harvey Norman the other week of a unit that's the same make as yours, but the next model up, that's got the same filter in it. It's just got a heater included in it, and in the video you can actually see the filter itself. It's a massive one. It's bigger than the filter in your car. Alex, did you capture note of the question?
Oh, sorry, what's the question? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Here's the thought. What if the council, I've asked the council before at the community board meeting, could they not purchase both purifiers? You know, and, you know, it's like they did the problem. And just say, you know, this is what you need to, you know, come and pick one up from here or something. where do you live, da da da.
I suggest to you in the current freighting environment that's not a good plan. What is a better plan is to actually reach out to the retailers and get them to look through their stock and inventory systems and find out where the equipment is that works around the country, because you found a product that you feel does work. Now we've got to find out where all that stock is. We can't get 2 pumps from Sweden, for heaven's sakes, delivered overnight, and normally there are flights coming in from Europe more than once a day. Under COVID we've got added complexity, so we need to find out what is in the country and get it down here.
But if the council could drop off toilets after the earthquake to every home that was affected that didn't have toilets, and that was me, who didn't have a toilet for weeks and weeks and weeks, why can't the council deliver? That's what we're asking. Yeah.
Because after the earthquakes, the airlines were still running the same way, and they ordered 30,000 of them out of China and flew them into the country in a cargo plane. Currently, we can't get pumps delivered from Sweden. Airline freight is a serious, serious problem. The other problem we've got to understand also is whether these air filters...
This is a national disaster. This is a local disaster, and our government, like they did with the earthquake, should be helping. This is actually not just a fire that's just happened. This is actually a disaster that should be treated as a disaster.
Okay, so looking at the elected members in the room, of which there are 2 of you at the council table, the mayor was quite clear about not declaring...
She wouldn't know shit from flow.
Okay, so we have a lack of confidence and a lack of trust in the mayor.
Well, let's face it, Don. I haven't really seen the approach from our elected bodies to get out there in the community and actually fully understand the scale of the problem. I just, like Yanni was saying, it's the fundamentals of it all, the wrapping the community around, going right in there, setting up a health register.
Okay, so there was a meeting held today, as I understand it.
The council just don't seem to be pushing hard enough on this issue. I mean, you are, and good on you.
Michael, can I respond for a second? There was a meeting held today that I understand, I'm told the Mayor and the Minister of Health were in, and I understand that the question to declare a state of emergency was not raised. People have reached out to me this afternoon and expressed concern about the lack of our Mayor asking central government for assistance on this issue. So I suggest to you, Michael, that the question really is not on the elected members in the room. It is on us to go back to our MPs across the city and say to them, we need central government to be considering whether a state of emergency is declared in our city over this issue. So we need to use social media to reach out to those 5 or 6 MPs and ask that question. And to do that, we will need a collective of people, yes, I'm looking at you, social media team, to actually ask that question of those elected members. If we can't get our mayor to ask that question of the government, then we have to ask that question of our government that we voted in with a 75% majority to be kind. And I don't know about you, but I don't find this speech particularly kind.
You're not going to get it from Megan Woods, and you're not going to get it from Kojo Williams, and you're not going to get it from any of those, so you're just dreaming.
Well, maybe I am dreaming, but if we don't ask the question, we won't get the no answer that we're expecting. So let's at least ask the question.
Well, you're absolutely right. Does it qualify as a state of emergency? I believe it does. Just straight out health concerns alone.
Do you know why? Do you know why we didn't start emptying these trickling filters sooner? Because our staff made the assumption that if they asked the insurance company if we could get going sooner, they would say no and it would harm our insurance claim. They didn't even ask the question. The consultant said in an open public meeting last week, they didn't ask the question. So we need to not make the same mistakes our councillors making. We need to ask the question of those elected members and wait for them to actually give their no response. Because that will be an issue that we take to the election next year. And it'll be a serious question whether Christchurch looks at changing this government next year. So let's ask the question. Yes.
I don't get a microphone, but one thing I'd like to point out is that we've got an election coming.
You definitely need a microphone because the people down the back can't hear and I can't hear you because I'm going deaf.
I thought everyone could hear me.
What was that?
I thought everyone could hear me.
Into the microphone.
We've got an election, a local body election coming up, and
yep, okay. We've got a local body election coming up in October probably, and we've got to think about who's coasting to the end of the election, who's not going to stand for council for the next election, and then talk to the people who are standing for council so that we get there, in the area, get this issue pushed in front of all the other issues. Right?
Full major career.
Yes, I understand that, and most likely Phil will be mayor, I make that assumption. But surely there must be other councillors who are standing who need to be brought up to speed with it. Because the ones who are not standing, they're just going to coast along till October.
And that's right.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to
And
make.
that's not the end ourselves.
So we also need to know who we can vote for, who's going to keep on top of it and pushing it towards.
The councillors over here on the east have an incentive to do something about it. Those those are the people who need to be convinced. It's the people on the other side of the fence. I don't see Phil Major tonight either.
Yeah, exactly. It's the ones who are standing next election, wherever they're going to stand, whichever ones are going to stand, that we need to get hold of. And I don't know, I haven't seen a list of potential candidates for the next election. Those are, if we can get hold of whoever's doing it, we need to talk to them.
The nominations open on the 15th of July, is that correct? Yeah, Alex is standing for Central this year, Yanni's still standing in Linwood, I'm putting my hand up in the ring, Celeste will still be running on Coastal. There are people in the community that are putting their hands up and they want to do something about this.
Sure.
Yeah, so you've got a couple of points there, and these are things that have escaped me, and one of the things from a social media campaign that I've attempted to do at this stage is to keep the politics out of it, but absolutely the politics are going to need to climb into it as we move forward. Right now tonight is about a community support and engagement. Moving forward, my personal belief is that we need to see a number of candidates stand in all of the electorates. Yanni, I'm going to pick on you because this is your ward. There was one candidate that stood against you this time. I'd like to see 2 or 3. Not because I don't think you'll make a good candidate and a good councillor in the next term, but because I believe that candidates also need endorsement from the community. That it needs to be seen that the community had a choice of candidates and then this community voted for that candidate. And then that candidate needs to be endorsed through the entire term. I apologised to Yanni a moment ago on purpose because I have not been listening to him on this issue. He's been speaking out against some of this stuff for some time. He didn't vote for the organics plant to be put in this area the way it has been put in the area. He has repeatedly stepped up to the table and asked questions, and I failed to endorse his asking those questions by coming out in my spaces, which is obviously social media, and saying, hey, Yanni asked this in the last meeting. What was the answer? And that's a thing that I think in social media land we're all going to have to do moving forward. I expect councillors are going to be looking over tomorrow's report with a fine-tooth comb and asking hours and hours of questions. Well, we need to also be listening to their answers, endorsing their answers, and asking the community to endorse those questions and answers until we get that information from staff, until we get budgets provided so they hire the right people to do this work. Clearly, we did not, as a community, hire the right people to be working in this plant because whatever happened, it went bang. So we, moving forward, are going to have to take more personal ownership and responsibility for this plant and what happens in our community. Does that address some of what your concern is? Yeah.
Just going back to, I'd like to say, I've been involved with Yanni now for a year or so, the OPK. He has been outstanding, this man. He's put himself out on love. He's actually gone out and battled. He's asked, like I said, he's asked all the right questions. I've seen him make impassioned dedication to the council meetings. It's absolutely impassioned. And I don't want Yanni having to piss around, trying to scramble around, having an election process. I want him working for us. So I don't want a whole lot of people standing against him, because he has got popular community support, and he's the longest standing councillor, and I tell you what, he bloody deserves that accolade. I want him working for us. I want him in there with a pencil, sharpened pencil, poking pricks in the eye, and getting some answers.
That is the counter position, Michael, where in fact you do the opposite of what I said. You run one candidate and that's it. And I tell you what, people ask me whether I'm looking at running a council, and I'm not at this stage, and I don't think I will, but I tell you what, I don't think I would run an award unless that community said, we want that guy and that's the only one we're going to choose, so no one else is standing. And personally, the only place I think I'd run is Central. Sorry, Alex. Simply because that's where I live. And that's the whole point of local representation, and that's what this is about.
Okay, we'll move on from that.
Yeah, let's move on from that. Any more questions? We seem to have lost some of the audience. They've obviously had enough for tonight. I think we probably all had enough. Okay?
No, can I just have a question?
Yep.
To the young man doing the reporting there.
We're interviewing the media. Excellent.
Well, you are, because I actually run News Talk ZB the other day, because the reporters and the woman that was reading out the news clearly said the Bromley wastewater plant and the Bromley OPP, and I get really, really anti. So I run News Talk ZB, and I said your newsreaders and the people that give out the news need to be mindful of what they're saying, because it's bad enough that we've got the stigma with Bromley, and then the newsreaders come out and the reporters and say Bromley wastewater plant, Bromley OPP, and I spoke to the Jess on News Talk ZB, and she said, I hear what you're saying, and I will talk to our newsreaders and our reporters, and since then they have stopped using the word Bromley wastewater. It's Christchurch wastewater. It's the whole of Christchurch that does it, but they keep saying Bromley wastewater, so I run News Talk ZB and I addressed it, and I'd like the reporters that do it to stop putting Bromley wastewater. It is the Christchurch wastewater.
Yeah, I think the official name of it is Christchurch wastewater plant. Yeah, I hear what you're saying as well, and I've been trying to say, when I'm talking about people affected, East Christchurch is sort of what we've been using, but I take on your point.
And it's the ponds too, the Bromley ponds.
Bromley ponds.
It's wildlife.
It's a wildlife too.
But it's only a little thing.
Yep, so a little bit of an update about media. In that case, today Stephen and I established a media alias in one of our mail systems so that we now have a mailing list of media contacts that we are building. And tomorrow, Stephen, guess what? We're going to email them all and tell them exactly that, because that message is not filtering through. The Auckland stations are not getting that message. And I tend to agree. I think that's important for the city as it happens, elected members. This city is sending its sewage to the treatment plants, not just Bromley. Otherwise, I think that what we need is a call to action to turn off all the sewer feeds that are outside of Bromley. If it is the Bromley plant, then it just services the people of Bromley. And I tell you what, I think those ponds will clean themselves up overnight, because I don't think you guys do as much going as happens around the rest of the city.
Wind up.
Time? Had enough? You want to go home?
Can I say something?
Go on.
On the back of that, if we ignore every day, the wife is like, oh, I hate this place, I'm going to get out of here. So on the other hand, we're in Bromley. You can't sell your house, you can't sell, you can't have open homes or anything because of the stench. Things like that. And you're going to lose money on your house through the relevant Bromley, I think. So until it's resolved, we're sort of stuck with this.
Yeah, it's on my list. Public acquisitions is on my list of things. That's why I said to you that I see this blowing out to a $200 million project, because frankly, I think that this plant operator should be looking at doing red zoning the same way as this government did red zoning. That is on my list, but the immediate thing tonight is get this $1 million support package across the line and get people into doctor's surgeries. Damien.
I just want to sort of put to the point too, there's 380,000 people live in Christchurch. There's 1,500 people roughly on our page. There's about 200 people who are over it. There's about 35 people in this room who have stayed here. And there's probably only about 10 people doing something about it. Where are we headed? Round in circles.
We need to gather more numbers. This is part of why I actually think that what Gary has put together is a very smart package, and councillors should endorse the boundary of 3,000 homes, because that is going to make some people scream. When they see somebody else getting something and they're not, they might rise up, and then we will get the opportunity through the media and in social media to actually say, well, you need to make your voice heard. These people have made their voice heard. Boy, oh boy, we made our voices heard last week when we got an hour and a half to tell the mayor off. And I tell you what, I don't think she's too happy about that. I wouldn't be.
Yeah, man.
She doesn't care, she's pushing.
At the end of the day,
Pete, on the way out, I asked her, about what's happening about this, maybe shutting it down. She said, it ain't happening, Michael, it's not happening. Got bigger fish to fry.
well, we voted new members, don't we?
Yeah, and on that note, I'll make it clear, I've been on Phil Major since November the 1st. I've asked him simple questions, I've never had a reply. I've asked him, what's going on, what are you going to do about it, and what are you helping us with? I've never had a reply. Today, I see he's down on some intersection looking at footpaths, saying the council's overspent on cobbles instead of asphalt. What is that guy actually doing to help us? This Phil Major for mayor, he's no good. Let's just make it clear. We need someone who wants to help us. Where is he tonight? Not here. What was he doing today? Looking at footpaths and trying to save the council money. We've got an issue that needs fixing. We're going round and round in circles. We need people who are going to act on it. Simple.
So before we go tonight, I'm happy to work with Yanni and whoever else is to do some community organising and getting the numbers and pressure on the council focus around, first and foremost, around Bromley itself, where the weight of the effects is felt. So I think that would be a pretty good place to end, is anybody who wants to be involved in that to have a bit of a chat. I feel like we're going a bit round and round in circles, and I agree with what you say about Major. He can grandstand with the standing on his way firing, but that's not going to actually let's get people together. It doesn't mean everybody has to do much at all, but it's actually getting everybody to express themselves in a way that it cannot be ignored. At the moment, it's just us squeaky wheels saying it stinks, and people who live over the other side of town are like, oh yeah, oh that smells, having no idea what it's like for you people who live in Bromley.
Hands up, who wants to be involved?
That's not just Bromley, what about the rest of the ends?
Yeah, I think the issue is we've got to look at the first 3,000 houses, because that's what the council's looking at.
It's not to exclude the rest,
But that's exactly what you're doing, and that's what's been happening all along. It's Bromley, Bromley, Bromley. What about the rest of the east?
I think we need to set up the structure first, if we can.
No, you don't. We need to include everyone from the start. Everyone needs to be included from the start, because that was the fuck up in the first place.
How do we include them in the idea?
Well, this is the second meeting.
Where are they?
This is the second meeting.
And where are
At
they?
the heart of it, where is everybody?
I'm from Aranui.
I'm here.
I'm from Aranui.
But where
Where is everybody tonight?
And then we have a third meeting.
But look around. We don't have the elite, the VIPs at the front of the room like we did last week.
This is a community
There
meeting.
is no way you're going to get people here without the people up there to answer the questions.
We had that a fortnight ago.
Yeah, exactly.
65 people turned up.
I know, I watched it.
You watched it,
I watched it.
so you didn't come along.
I had other commitments.
Okay, so 65 people turned up.
Watched online.
This is what I'm saying. 380,000 comes down to 1,500, 1,500 comes down to 200, 200 comes down to 65.
I hear what you're saying, but now is not the time to exclude. Now is the time to include if you want more.
Okay, do you want to do a mail drop across Christchurch, let them know that we need some people?
No, it's not my job to do that.
Or how are we going to do it?
I guess that's the thing.
You do it by including representation in this thing that you're setting up right now, as a start.
The practicality of it is just that we only have so many people, so we start with the most affected area
And
and
this is
scale
not
up.
affected because we're right next door to it.
Yeah. We scale up. It's not, if people want to join in, cool. But you set yourself up to fail. Like this, very much like community organising stuff, no one do. You start with the most affected people and you move out. And anybody who wants to offer their strength to it can join in. You welcome people. But
Where do you live?
The borders are bullshit. Sorry?
Where do you live?
South in Brighton.
South in Brighton, but yeah, I understand that. But most of the time, it's Woolston, Linwood, Bromley, Aranui.
But it's
most of the
not.
time. There's occasionally, yeah.
I would agree, the borders are bullshit, okay?
I've had a headache and I felt nauseous, and it's been the worst thing in the last 3 days, and I've even smelled my
Would you like
life.
to be on the health register? You're being monitored?
I see my doctor.
Anyone who likes a little bit of a giggle just to lighten up the end of the evening, my wife just sent this through remotely. I think she's drawing attention to this little bit here. So clearly we've got their attention in the room. I don't think that that's a problem. And I can tell you what, if you want to talk about problems, when council staff come up to me and say, mate, your bloody website is a problem, that means that they're watching. We've got the ear of the staff, and they're the ones that are doing the job. Thanks. They really are the ones that are doing the work, and we need to get alongside them and get them more help and get them more resources. But thanks everyone for turning up tonight. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you for organising that.
You're welcome, Vicky. It's my pleasure. Right, let's pack this up, put some chairs away, and get the hell out of here so we can go home.